I'm going to risk dipping my toes into some controversy today and talk about YouTube's recent crackdown on ad blockers. Obviously, I'm going to be a little bit biased, right? I've been making YouTube videos full time for the last about 13 years. It's the only career I've ever had. I have no other marketable skills whatsoever. And so in effect, people watching advertisements has allowed me to not have to go learn something useful to survive in the world. Obviously, ad blockers are not a new thing. They existed before I even started making YouTube videos. And so here I want to explore a couple things. One is, why now? After all these years, did YouTube decide, okay, it's the time. Let's crack down on these things that have always existed. And two, exploring the sentiment that I've seen in response to these evolving changes. But before that, just a bit of context, because there are those of you watching this who simply watch ads on YouTube. There are also those of you who are YouTube Premium subscribers, and I guess thank you to both of you, but you probably wouldn't have seen any of the things around this. So a quick Google search will show a lot of recent news stories about YouTube cracking down on ad blockers. And what that looks like is now when you go to watch a YouTube video, if you have one of a set of ad blockers, and this is going to be a whack-a-mole game on YouTube's side, is you'll get this display notification that says ad blockers violate YouTube's terms of service. Looks like you have an ad blocker, either disable it or get YouTube Premium, and then you can continue watching the video. Now, ad blockers are also not a new thing, and Google, being one of the biggest tech companies in the world and one that exists because of advertisements, they would be aware of this since they were first created, if Google wasn't actually the company that first created it in-house. So it begs the question, why did it take them, 15 years of YouTube ownership to decide now is the time that we're going to take a stand on the site? My theory for why now is, oh God, it's going to sound so boring, but I find it interesting. I think it's a response to the macroeconomic conditions with higher interest rates. And also, I think it's the fact that YouTube has essentially hit the total addressable market of the internet connected world. And as such, they can't really grow the user base of the platform further. And so what they need to do is optimize each segment of users. And for a long time now, they've been able to add more users across the world, and also they've had enough of a population on their own in-house apps that don't have ad blocker. And so they've been able to let slide the folks who are using web browsers to watch the videos. But now, with the addition of higher interest rates and that less user growth, they're looking to optimize the existing user base of the platform in any way they can in order to increase the revenue per user of the site. And while Google, or Alphabet in this case, is a publicly traded company and they have to release their earnings every quarter, they don't actually isolate YouTube's finances in the release. But it is theorized that even to this day, with the total internet population of the world essentially tapped into, that the platform is still not profitable. For a long time, this may not have mattered all that much. I'm not going to go into the specifics as to why in a zero interest rate environment it's less important to become profitable quickly as it is in a higher interest rate environment, but it is the case. And so in the higher interest rate environment, again, they might say, look, we actually really need to prioritize making YouTube as a standalone entity profitable when it's not now, especially because we can't rely on bringing in more users to try to drive that profitability. And look, again, outside of Google's own accounting department, it's purely speculation on my part that YouTube may still not be profitable as a standalone entity. But even so, if that is the case, it's not like some huge shortcoming on YouTube's part. Serving video to people is really, really expensive. And that's why when you look out there really aren't many competitors to YouTube because it requires so much money and infrastructure to make it happen that competitors can't just pop up out of nowhere. And you look at sites like Twitch and the growing pains that they're going through. Again, it's because of how expensive it is. And once you can't rely on just VC funding or the fact that growth is going to justify this happening in the future, you suddenly have to make some changes to try to hit profitability. Anyway, that's my theory on the why now. Macroeconomics. Anybody still out there watching this? Okay, well, for the two of you who are still there, now let's get into the controversy, because I've seen some of the reception to this in comments and Reddit threads and things like that. And I think there are a couple camps of people here. But one of the stances I kind of disagree with is the folks who I've seen say, well, this is ridiculous. I should be able to use my ad block to watch whatever I want ad-free on YouTube for free. And I'm not going to like stand here and shame those people and say, oh, how dare you not support the creators or something like that. Like whatever. People want to do that. That's on them if they are able to get away with it. But on the other end, how is it at all surprising that YouTube would act against this in order to try to monetize the users of the site? Because, again, if they're not earning any revenue off of you watching ads, they are losing money serving you that video bandwidth. And as a publicly traded company, well, any company really, but even more so a publicly traded company, their goal is to deliver value to shareholders. And you may not agree with that. You may think, well, they're big enough already. They don't deserve to get anything more from me. You shouldn't be surprised that they take an action like this in order to try to not lose money showing video to a user. And I do think it's a fairly entitled perspective to say, well, I deserve to be able to watch ad-free for free. And I'm not going to say, look, you're taking money out of my pocket, whatever. You would say, well, you, Jardon, you've made enough money in your time on YouTube. And maybe that is true as well. But I'm also in the same bucket of getting ad served as someone who is just breaking in and they've had their first month of deciding, I'm going to do this full time. And so there's not really a way to separate the two of those things either. Again, though, if you want to play the part of the mole in the game of whack-a-mole with YouTube figuring out how to block each new ad blocker that circumvents their new policy, like you can do that, but it seems strange to be upset and think that they shouldn't take a stand against that. And look, to give a little bit of equal airtime here and not focus entirely on one side, I've seen responses to those sorts of comments I just talked about that said, yeah, dude, just get YouTube Premium. And I mean, look, I do all right for myself. And when I saw the price increase from like, I don't know, $10 to $14 a month a couple months ago, I was like, are you, what? Bro, it's like a 40% increase in price on YouTube Premium. This is wild. I mean, inflation's, it's going pretty wild, but 40%, I don't think we're there yet in the CPI. Oh my goodness. So like, I understand also not wanting to fork over the $14 a month, which I think is the new price now. Even though I've continued with it myself, I guess for me, it feels more like an obligation, like it's my way to give back versus it necessarily being something that is worth the $14. Although I will say getting to listen to videos with the phone, black screened is a very important feature. So they might still actually have me on that. And look, another component that I can empathize with on the pushback is that not only is YouTube trying to serve more people ads by getting rid of the blockers, but they are also trying to serve more ads to every person. And ads simply are a bit more intrusive now than they were years back. And I even wish that on my end, I could go into my channel settings and I could say, you know what? I don't really want to have political campaign ads showing up on my videos because it's just, I don't know. Is that what I want to associate with my content? But I don't have the ability to make those changes on my end. I'm simply subjected to the ads that Google wishes to show that match my content. So it's definitely not a perfect system. But what I will say is that the system they have in place in terms of the amount of ads that they are serving to people, they don't really just mess around and fire off a global site change without doing a significant amount of testing beforehand with smaller subsets of users. And so when you see, oh my goodness, it seems like they've started serving more ads, or you see, hey, what the heck, they have stopped allowing my ad blocker. If it's a global change at that point, there is a very, very good chance that the data they got from their many, many iterations of small tests with small subsets of users, they have seen that it's actually worked positively in favor of their goals as a company. And so that's why, like in the past, I used to complain all the time about changes to the site. Like, why are you burying the subscriptions tab? It's all algorithmic now. People aren't going to see my videos as much. Why are you getting rid of the cool custom channel page designs? All this sort of stuff. And I've learned over time, again, YouTube they don't make changes lightly. They test and test and test. But what they're testing for is, do those changes work towards their goals as a website? Not as much, do those goals help Jardon making his videos. And so while I'm not excited, that is the reality, and I've simply learned to accept it. And the same is true here. And so I see an article like this: YouTube's crackdown spurs record uninstalls of ad blockers. So you see people saying, like, how could they do this? I should be able to watch with my ad blocker. But their tests have determined that people are actually more likely to cave and get rid of the ad blocker because they value the content that they're watching more than they do the inconvenience of having to watch the ad in order to access it. Now, you could argue in a case like this where it says, oh, usually there's 6,000 uninstallations per day. Now it's almost doubled to 11,000. Well, maybe some of those people are spiking to even 52,000 here. Maybe some of those people are just, they're playing the part of the mole again in the whack-a-mole game, trying to switch to another that can get around the new policy. So it's hard to know what's happening there, but it reminds me very much of the case with Netflix over the last year. Remember when Netflix said, love is sharing a password? Yeah, well, then back in, I think, May, it was, they were like, you know what? Just kidding. Our stock is way, way down and our growth prospects aren't looking super great. So, we didn't delete this tweet. We're not entirely sure why, but yeah, we're making a change. Look, so Netflix, they got real low there. And then they ended up having to make some changes to their business model. They introduced the ad-supported tier. And they also decided, yeah, we're not going to let you share passwords outside of the same household anymore. And they really changed their policy on that. And everyone at the time was like, frick this. I'm not going to get Netflix if I can't use so-and-so relative's password login. They're going to get my boycott. This is going to be the end of Netflix. Well, actually, it worked out pretty well for them, and they've converted a lot of those password sharers into new accounts. They have a whole bunch of people on board in the ad-supported tiers, and their share price has ticked right back up, and the Netflix password sharing crackdown is officially working despite that pushback that we saw initially. People ended up deciding the content actually was more valuable in the end. And so this YouTube ad block scenario, it reminds me a bit of the Netflix thing. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if some of the folks at Google maybe even looked at Netflix, saw how this panned out, and it gave them a little bit of encouragement that, hey, even if our data is showing one thing, also here's a case study that we can look at, and it actually worked favorably for them in that we can, you know, hit some pain points a bit more for our users in blocking their ad block, and they'll still stay on the platform because there really aren't other competitors. And look, if you are very upset about not being able to use ad blocker, you can try to find video elsewhere, right? There just, again, isn't really much else to go to. If YouTube makes changes draconian enough that it drives enough users off of the site, they will see a negative result in their data, and they will probably make changes accordingly, or otherwise they will open an opportunity for a competitor to come in. So those are all possibilities, but they've determined that the upside is better than the downside in what they're doing, and that's why it's gone this way. So all that said, I try not to let my bias impact what I was saying here. Again, I obviously like it when people watch ads or have YouTube Premium, especially YouTube Premium. It is like a very small subset of the YouTube user base, but it accounts for a much, much more outsized portion of a channel's revenue, especially on a channel that has longer videos like my second channel with the stream VODs. But I'm not here again to shame people who use ad blocker. If you want to do that and you want to now try to play that whack-a-mole game, then more power to you. You do you. It is what it is. It's all part of the game, I suppose. But I do think it is a fairly entitled opinion to say I deserve to be able to use the ad blocker without repercussion because why? I don't know. But still, the ad system on YouTube is imperfect. It would be nice if creators could get a little bit more control over what ads are shown on their content. But that's where the system is for now, and it's what Google's internal tests have shown is what they can get away with. So that's where we're at. That's my take. I hope you've enjoyed. I hope you didn't tune out with the whole macroeconomic thing, and I'll see you next time.